The dust on Xylo's moon hung perpetually in the air, coating everything with a fine layer of reddish-brown powder. The human colony, established 30 years ago, sat like a collection of dull metal boxes across the barren landscape. Tall fences surrounded the settlement, marking this safe zone beyond which residents were forbidden to venture due to unidentified anomalies and ancient technological remnants that dotted the terrain. For 8-year-old Theo, the colony was nothing short of a prison. The recycled air, the same faces day after day, the monotonous schedule of the education center. It all felt suffocating. His parents were colony engineers, always busy maintaining life support systems and rarely home before his bedtime. This left Theo with an abundance of time to daydream about what lay beyond the perimeter fences. Warning: boundary breach detected in Sector 17, announced the colony's AI system one evening. Theo smirked from his hiding spot behind a storage unit. He had figured out weeks ago how to create false alerts in the security system, giving him precious minutes to slip through a weak section of fencing while the guards rushed to investigate the non-existent breach elsewhere. The Forbidden Zone beckoned him with its mysteries. Strange metal formations jutted from the ground at impossible angles, some emitting a faint blue glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. Scientists called them remnants, the technological leftovers of whatever civilization had once inhabited this moon before vanishing mysteriously. Adults spoke of them in hushed, fearful tones. Theo found them beautiful. The boy clambered over a small ridge, his small boots leaving imprints in the undisturbed dust. At the bottom of the slope stood a structure unlike any he had seen before, a half-collapsed dome with intricate patterns etched into its metallic surface. Soft light leaked from a crack near its base. Without hesitation, Theo approached and peered inside. A pair of large amber eyes stared back at him. Theo stumbled backward, falling onto the dusty ground. His heart hammered against his ribs as a figure emerged from the opening. A girl, or at least something girl-shaped. She appeared to be around his age, with pale green skin that seemed to shimmer slightly in the fading daylight. Her ears tapered to elegant points, and faint luminescent patterns traced across her forearms and cheeks. They regarded each other in terrified silence. "Hello," Theo finally managed, raising a trembling hand in greeting. The alien girl tilted her head, studying him with those enormous amber eyes. She replied with a series of melodic sounds that made no sense to Theo, but somehow conveyed caution and curiosity. Slowly, Theo reached into his pocket and pulled out a small Earth chocolate bar, his most prized possession, sent in the quarterly supply shuttle from his grandmother on Mars. He unwrapped it and broke off a piece, placing it on the ground between them before scooting backward. The girl approached cautiously, crouched, and examined the offering without touching it. Then she disappeared back into the dome, emerging moments later with something in her hand. She placed it beside the chocolate, a small crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. Theo smiled. The girl's mouth curved upward in response. That first encounter lasted only minutes before Theo heard the distant whine of a security drone. He grabbed the crystal, waved goodbye, and scrambled back toward the colony fence. As he slipped through, he made a silent promise to return. And return he did, almost every day for the next 3 weeks. He brought small treasures from the colony, mechanical toys, picture books, once even a small music player, and she shared her own wonders. Seeds that grew into luminescent flowers within minutes of being planted, a handheld device that created three-dimensional light sculptures in the air, and a small metallic sphere that hovered and followed simple hand gestures. They developed a rudimentary form of communication, a combination of drawings in the dust, simple hand signals, and gradually, a few shared words. He learned that her name sounded something like Lyra, and she could approximate Theo with her musical voice. He discovered that her people lived beneath the surface of the moon, in vast networks of tunnels and chambers, hiding from something, though he couldn't understand what. On their 12th meeting, Lyra brought a simple translator device, a thin circlet that allowed for basic communication when worn. Theo learned that her people called themselves the Sylphine, and that they were the descendants of those who had built the remnants, having evolved and adapted after a great catastrophe. They remained hidden from humans, observing the colony from afar, uncertain whether to trust these new inhabitants. "My family travels soon," Lyra told him on their 15th meeting, the translator rendering her melodic language into somewhat stilted English. 2. The deep settlements. Far beneath. Annual migration. "Will you come back?" Theo asked, feeling a knot forming in his stomach. Lyra's patterns dimmed slightly. "Unknown. Perhaps many seasons pass." Something fierce and desperate seized Theo then, the thought of losing his only real friend, the one person who made life on this dusty moon bearable. "I'll find you," he declared. "When I'm grown up, I'll have my own ship, and I'll find you wherever you go." Lyra tilted her head. Why would humans search for Sylphine? Theo thought about the stories his grandmother had told him, about Earth traditions and connections between people. Because we're friends. And on Earth, when people care about each other and don't want to be apart, they get married. Marry? Lyra tested the unfamiliar concept. "It means you promise to stay together forever," Theo explained, with the absolute certainty of childhood. "So I promise, when I grow up, I'll find you, and we can get married. Then we won't have to say goodbye again." Lyra's patterns brightened with amusement and something like tenderness. She reached out and touched her fingertips to his, a gesture he had learned was significant in her culture. Her fingertips glowed brighter at the contact. "Then Lyra accepts this promise," she said. Before they parted, Lyra gave Theo a small glowing stone, memory crystal, she called it, which pulsed with a gentle rhythm like a heartbeat. In return, Theo gave her his most precious possession, a data chip containing his grandmother's stories about Earth, with pictures of oceans and forests and cities that Lyra found fascinating. The next day, Theo rushed to their meeting place as soon as school ended. But the dome was empty, the entrance sealed as if it had never opened. He returned every day for a week, then every few days for a month, but Lyra never reappeared. All he had was the glowing stone and the memory of a promise that seemed increasingly childish as days turned into weeks, then months, then years. But the stone continued to pulse, and the promise remained. 15 years later, Theo wiped grease from his hands as he finished repairing a malfunctioning coolant pump on the cargo hauler Rusty Venture. At 33, he had grown tall and lean, his once soft features hardened by years of working in the unforgiving environment of space. A thin scar crossed his right eyebrow, a souvenir from an encounter with pirates in the Outer Belt 3 years prior. His dark hair was kept shortly cropped for practicality, but his eyes still held the same curiosity they had in childhood. Pump diagnostics complete. Functionality at 97%. Acceptable parameters, announced a voice from the battered coffee machine perched on his workbench. Only 97. Sparky? I must be losing my touch, Theo replied, tossing his wrench into a toolbox. Or perhaps you're distracted by the fact that today marks 15 years since your alleged alien girlfriend vanished into the ground, the AI retorted. Sparky had begun life as a standard service AI in a high-end coffee machine. After salvaging the device from a luxury liner's garbage, Theo had modified it extensively, expanding its capabilities far beyond its original programming, and unfortunately, giving it access to his personal logs in the process. She wasn't my girlfriend, Theo muttered, and I wasn't hallucinating despite what the colony psychologist said. 15 years of searching obscure databases, chasing rumors about hidden species, and spending every credit on spacecraft modifications to detect signals that conventional systems can't register. All for a childhood imaginary friend. Totally normal behavior. Theo walked to the small porthole in his workshop, staring out at the stars. The Rusty Venture was docked at Ganymede Station, undergoing resupply before heading back out on its regular freight route between Jupiter and Saturn. As a freelance mechanic, Theo could pick his contracts, choosing ships that ventured to the farthest reaches of settled space, places where rumors of strange encounters or unexplained phenomena might lead him to some trace of the Sylphine. His quarters reflected his obsession. Star charts covered one wall, marked with notes and pins indicating possible sightings of ships with unknown configurations or energy signatures. Ancient data tablets containing xenobiological studies were stacked in precarious piles. A homemade scanner, built from salvage parts, constantly swept through frequencies that commercial systems ignored. And on a small shelf above his bunk, protected by a clear case, sat Lyra's crystal, still pulsing with the same gentle rhythm after all these years. Payment received for the coolant repair, Sparky announced. Captain Voss also asked if you'd be interested in fixing their navigation array. Apparently, it's been glitching when they approach the Shroud Nebula. Theo's head snapped up. The Shroud? They're heading to the Shroud Nebula. Mention it casually, like it wasn't your latest obsession since that drunk Centaurian miner told you about seeing green ghosts there 6 months ago. Theo was already pulling up star charts on his tablet. The Shroud Nebula lay at the edge of charted space, a swirling mass of dust and gas that played havoc with navigation systems and sensors. Few ships ventured there without compelling reason, and those that did often reported strange phenomena: time dilation, hallucinations, ghostly ships appearing and disappearing. "Tell Captain Voss I'll take the job," Theo said, already planning what equipment he would need. "And schedule a diagnostic for the Sparrow. Your rust bucket of scout ship? Why bother? It barely made it back from the Titan outpost. Just do it, Sparky." The AI sighed, an unnecessary affectation Theo had never bothered to remove from its programming. "Diagnostic scheduled. I assume we're going ghost hunting in the nebula when the venture leaves?" Despite my repeated warnings about the statistical improbability of finding your green girlfriend based on the drunken ramblings of a miner who also claimed to have been abducted by sentient space squids, Theo didn't answer. Instead, he opened a drawer and removed a scanner he'd been working on for months, designed specifically to detect the unique energy signature of Lyra's crystal. The scanner had never registered anything in all his years of searching, but something about the Shroud Nebula called to him. Call it intuition or desperation, but he couldn't ignore it. 3 days later, the rusty venture approached the outer boundary of the Shroud Nebula. Theo stood on the bridge, ostensibly monitoring the newly repaired navigation array, but his attention was fixed on the swirling colors that filled the view screen. Purples, blues, and greens undulated like a living thing, occasionally flashing with bursts of electrical activity. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Captain Voss remarked, a weathered woman with more artificial body parts than original ones. "Also deadly as hell. We stay on the edges, pick up our cargo from the research station, and get out. No detours." "What kind of research station operates in the Shroud?" Theo asked casually. "The classified kind," Voss replied with a sharp glance. "The kind that pays triple the standard rates for supply runs, provided we don't ask questions and don't mention their existence to port authorities. All I know is they study the nebula itself. Composition, effects, that sort of thing." Theo nodded, trying to contain his excitement. A research station meant people with knowledge about the Shroud, people who might have seen or detected something unusual. When a venture docked with the small, unremarkable station hidden among the gases of the nebula's edge, Theo volunteered to help with the cargo transfer. Inside, the station was starkly utilitarian, its narrow corridors humming with machinery. The few researchers they encountered were tight-lipped and hurried, barely acknowledging the delivery crew. While transferring crates of equipment, Theo managed to separate from the group, slipping down a side corridor toward what appeared to be a control room. Inside, screens displayed data from various sensors deployed throughout the nebula. "You're not authorized to be here," said a sharp voice behind him. Theo turned to find a tall woman in a lab coat, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her ID badge identified her as Dr. Eleanor Reed, station director. "Saw the Tesla Apaletia." I got turned around looking for the restroom. "Interesting readings you've got there. Those energy fluctuations in Sector 7 look unusual." Dr. Reed's eyes narrowed. "Very unusual for a cargo handler to recognize energy fluctuation patterns." "I have some background in xenophysics," Theo replied, which wasn't entirely a lie. Self-taught counted as background, surely. Those patterns look almost artificial. Something shifted in the doctor's expression. You should return to your ship, Mr. Theo. Just Theo. Recognition flashed in her eyes. The mechanic who's been asking questions about unusual sightings throughout the outer systems. Your reputation precedes you. How then said, I didn't realize I had a reputation. The scientific community monitors those who take interest in certain phenomena. Some consider you a nuisance. Others, a useful independent data gatherer. She studied him for a moment. What is your interest in the shroud, specifically? Theo hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. I encountered a non-human intelligence as a child. I've been looking for them ever since. I have reason to believe they might be connected to this region of space. Dr. Reed's posture changed subtly. She reached past him to press a series of commands into the console, bringing up a new display, a waveform pattern that pulsed in a regular rhythm. Does this look familiar to you? She asked. Quietly, Theo's heart nearly stopped. The waveform matched the pulse of Lyra's crystal, the rhythm he had fallen asleep to for 15 years. Where did you record this? He whispered. We didn't, Reed replied. It's being broadcast from somewhere deep within the nebula. We've been studying it for months. It repeats on a precise cycle, with occasional variations that suggest it's not natural, but a deliberate communication. It's a beacon, Theo breathed. They're calling for someone, or warning someone away, Reed countered. The shroud is dangerous, Theo. Ships that venture too deep experience time distortions, hallucinations. Some never return. I need to go there, Theo said firmly. Reed shook her head. Impossible. The rusty venture isn't equipped to penetrate the nebula safely, and I certainly can't authorize use of our research vessels. Then I'll use my own ship. It's small, but I've modified it extensively. You'd be committing suicide. I've spent 15 years preparing for this moment, Theo said, pulling Lyra's crystal from his pocket. It pulsed in perfect synchronization with the waveform on the screen. I made a promise. Reed stared at the crystal, then at Theo. Finally, she sighed. I can't stop you, but I can help you survive, perhaps. She turned to a terminal and began typing. I'm transferring navigational data that might help you avoid the worst of the distortion fields. And she hesitated, then continued typing. There, a security override that will prevent our automated defenses from firing on your ship. You have weapons pointed at the nebula? Theo asked, surprised. Not at the nebula, Reed corrected. At what might come out of it. 2 days later, Theo sat in the cockpit of his scout ship, the Sparrow. Small and unremarkable from the outside, the vessel contained Theo's life work. Every scanner, shield modification, and navigation enhancement he had been able to build or steal over 15 years of preparation. This is suicide, Sparky complained from the coffee machine Theo had permanently installed in the ship's control panel. The statistical probability of survival is... I don't want to know, Theo interrupted, running final system checks. Less than that of being struck by lightning while being attacked by a shark during a solar eclipse. The AI finished anyway. Your confidence is touching. Theo activated the engines, feeling the familiar vibration as the Sparrow detached from the rusty Venture's docking bay. Captain Voss had been furious when he announced his intention, but couldn't technically stop him. Freelancers set their own terms, and Theo had completed the contracted work. Final systems check complete, Sparky announced reluctantly. All modifications functioning at optimal capacity, which is still woefully inadequate for what you're attempting. Noted, Theo engaged the thrusters, piloting the small ship away from the Venture and toward the swirling depths of the nebula. Begin scanning on all frequencies. Focus on the beacon signal. The Sparrow penetrated the outer layers of the nebula, immediately encountering turbulence as gas clouds buffeted the small vessel. The view screen filled with swirling colors, occasionally flashing with lightning-like energy discharges. Theo followed the navigational path Dr. Reed had provided, weaving between particularly dense sections of the nebula. 3 hours in, the effects began. First came the sensor malfunctions, readings jumping erratically, showing impossible energy spikes or dropping to zero without warning. Then the visual distortion started. Shapes formed in the gas clouds, faces, hands, entire landscapes that appeared and dissolved in seconds. "I'm experiencing data corruption," Sparky reported, its voice fluctuating in pitch. "Temporal anomalies detected. My internal clock is desensing from ship systems." "Hold it together," Theo urged both the AI and himself. The crystal in his pocket pulsed stronger now, warming against his skin. He placed it on the console, watching as its light intensified the deeper they traveled into the nebula. A massive energy wave rolled toward them, registering on sensors moments before impact. The ship bucked violently as it hit, sending Theo slamming against his restraints. Warning alarms blared as multiple systems went offline simultaneously. "Hull integrity at 60%, Sparky reported, its voice now eerily calm. "Primary navigation offline. Life support compromised. We're going to die here, and I'll never know if you were chasing a fantasy or an actual alien civilization. It's quite frustrating." "Secondary navigation," Theo grunted, fingers flying across manual controls. "Switch to backup life support. And I did get access to oxygen supplies in the primary hydroponics tank. We're not dead yet." Another energy wave approached, this one larger than the first. Theo attempted evasive maneuvers, but the ship's thrusters responded sluggishly. As the wave engulfed them, the view screen went completely white then black. For a moment, Theo thought he had lost consciousness. Then the blackness outside cleared, replaced by a vista so unexpected that Theo could only stare and wonder. The shroud had parted like a curtain, revealing a hidden pocket of clear space at its center. And there, illuminated by the light of a small, blue-white star, hung a planet, emerald green and azure blue, wrapped in wisps of cloud that sparkled with faint electrical charges. "Sparky, are you seeing this?" "How-wee-spa." "If you're referring to the statistically impossible habitable planet hiding in the center of a nebula that should render all life within extinct, then yes, I am recording this phenomenal violation of established astrophysics," the AI replied, sounding distinctly awestruck despite its sarcasm. The crystal on Theo's console now pulsed so brightly it was almost painful to look at directly. The ship's sensors, functioning intermittently, detected a faint signal emanating from the planet, the same rhythmic pattern they had been following. "Taking us in," Theo announced, directing the Sparrow toward the green world. As they approached, details became visible. Continents covered in what appeared to be vegetation, oceans of deep blue, and scattered across the surface, structures that glinted with metallic reflections. They were cities, but unlike any human architecture, organic-looking formations that seemed to grow from the landscape rather than being built upon it. The Sparrow's communications system suddenly activated, a stream of musical tones filling the cockpit. "Incoming transmission," Sparky translated. "It appears to be an approach vector?" "Yes, they're directing us to a specific landing zone." "Any signs of weapons or defensive systems?" Theo asked, scanning the planet's surface. "None detected, but our sensors are barely functional. We could be flying into anything from a welcoming committee to a planetary defense array." Theo took a deep breath, fingers tightening on the controls. "Well, we've come this far." He guided the ship along the provided approach vector, entering the planet's atmosphere. The Sparrow shuddered and groaned, stress fractures spreading across its hull as it descended through cloud layers crackling with electricity. Theo fought for control, compensating for systems that failed one after another during the brutal descent. They broke through the cloud cover to see a vast plain stretching below, bordered by forests of impossibly tall, slender trees with iridescent foliage. In the center of the plain stood a circular platform that glowed with the same blue light as Lyra's crystal. "That's our landing pad, I'm guessing," Theo remarked. "Assuming we can land rather than crash," Sparky noted. "Primary landing gear is non-responsive. Switching to emergency braking thrusters." The Sparrow lurched as Theo fought to bring it down intact. The ship skidded across the platform, screeching to a halt mere meters from the edge. Steam hissed from ruptured coolant lines as the vessel settled, listing slightly to one side. Well, Theo said after a moment of silence, we're here. Congratulations on achieving the nearly impossible, Sparky acknowledged. Now we just have to hope whatever lies here doesn't immediately dissect us for scientific curiosity. Theo unstrapped himself and moved carefully through the tilted ship to the airlock. Environmental sensors showed the atmosphere outside was surprisingly Earth-like, if slightly higher in oxygen content. After a moment's hesitation, he unsealed his pressure suit's helmet, taking an experimental breath. The air tasted sweet, with hints of something like cinnamon and ozone. His lungs tingled slightly, but he felt no immediate adverse effects. Atmosphere appears breathable, he reported. I'm going outside. I'll prepare your epitaph, Sparky replied. Here lies Theo, who survived the impossible only to be eaten by the improbable. Theo activated the airlock cycle. The outer door slid open with a hiss, revealing the landing platform bathed in the blue-white light of the system star. The gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth standard, giving him a buoyancy that compensated for his trembling legs after the rough landing. The platform stretched about 50 meters in each direction, its surface covered in intricate patterns that reminded Theo of the markings on Lyra's skin. Beyond the platform's edge, the plain extended to distant forests, their foliage shifting colors as the breeze moved through them. And directly ahead, a group of figures approached from what appeared to be an entrance in the ground itself. They walked with fluid grace, tall and slender, with the same pale green skin Theo remembered from his childhood. Their clothing consisted of form-fitting garments that seemed woven from material that changed color subtly as they moved, blending with their surroundings. But it was their faces that held Theo transfixed, large amber eyes, delicate features, and those distinctive tapered ears. Sylphine, Lyra's people, they were real. The group stopped several meters away, regarding him with expressions Theo couldn't read. One of them, slightly taller than the others, stepped forward and spoke, the same musical language he remembered, though deeper and more complex than Lyra's childish speech had been. Theo responded by slowly reaching into his pocket and withdrawing the crystal. He held it out, its pulse now synchronized with subtle lights that ran through the platform beneath his feet. The tall Sylphine's eyes widened. It said something to the others, who immediately formed a protective semicircle. From behind them emerged another figure, this one moving with measured dignity. Female, Theo thought, though the gender distinctions were subtle. She wore more elaborate garments than the others, with intricate patterns woven into the fabric. Her skin bore more extensive markings than he remembered seeing on Lyra, tracing complex designs across her visible skin. Age, perhaps, or status. She approached without fear, studying him intently before speaking a single word that needed no translation. How? His heart stuttered. Older, yes, but the voice, like music given form, was unmistakable. Lyra, he breathed. 15 years melted away in an instant. Despite the changes, her greater height, the elaborate clothing, the more extensive markings on her skin, those amber eyes were exactly as he remembered. Lyra approached until she stood directly before him. Her people remained tense, watching carefully, but made no move to interfere. She raised her hand, palm outward, in a gesture achingly familiar from their childhood meetings. Theo mirrored the gesture, pressing his palm against hers. Her skin was cool to the touch, with a faint vibration like a barely perceptible current running beneath the surface. The markings on her hand glowed brighter at the contact. You, remember me, Theo said, his voice catching. The human child who promised marriage, Lyra replied in perfect, unaccented English. Who vanished from our monitoring systems 15 planetary cycles ago when the colony abandoned Xylo's moon. Abandoned? We were evacuated, Theo corrected. A solar flare damaged the colony's radiation shielding. They relocated everyone to Titan. I tried to get back, but by then the moon had been designated uninhabitable. I've been searching for you ever since. Lyra tilted her head in that familiar gesture of curiosity. For 15 cycles? What? I made a promise, Theo said simply, and you kept the data chip I gave you. It taught me your language, she confirmed, and much about your species. One of the others, Sylphine, spoke urgently, gesturing toward the sky. Lyra responded briefly before turning back to Theo. The nebula grows unstable, she explained. We must return below. You will accompany us. Theo glanced back at his ship. Sparky, my AI, it's integrated with the ship's systems. Lyra nodded and spoke to her companions. Two of them moved toward the Sparrow. They will extract your artificial intelligence and bring it. The vessel cannot be saved. Its structure is compromised beyond repair. Theo winced but nodded. The Sparrow had been his home for years, but it had served its purpose. Lead the way. The entrance to the underground complex was hidden beneath a seamless panel in the platform. It spiraled downward, a ramp circling a central column that glowed with the same blue light as the crystal. As they descended, Theo marveled at the architecture. Organic curves blended with precise geometric patterns, all seemingly grown rather than constructed. Your cities are built underground? He asked as they passed multiple levels and branching corridors. Our ancestors retreated beneath the surface during the Great Burning, Lyra explained. When the star that would become the Shroud, Nebula, began its death process. They created the nebula as a shield, accelerating and controlling the star's collapse to generate the energy fields that protect this world. Created the nebula? How deep Astonitz? That level of stellar engineering is far beyond even theoretical human capabilities. Our civilization is very old, Theo. What you saw on Xylo's moon were merely outposts, monitoring stations for the remnant technologies left behind during our expansion era. They reached what appeared to be a central chamber, vast and open, with a transparent ceiling that somehow showed the nebula swirling overhead despite being underground. Other Sylphine moved about the space, some turning to watch the newcomer with undisguised curiosity. Why did you leave? Theo asked. Why disappear after we met? Lyra guided him to a curved bench overlooking a pool of water that glowed with bioluminescent life. The monitoring station detected increasing instability in Xylos's orbit. We knew the human colony would soon be threatened. My family's assignment was completed, and we returned to the homeworld. You knew we were in danger and didn't warn us? The directive of non-interference was absolute then, Lyra replied. Much has changed since. Over recent cycles, there's been debate about establishing formal contact with humans. Your arrival may accelerate that discussion. The two Sylphine who had gone to the Sparrow arrived, carrying Sparky's central processing unit, the coffee machine, now disconnected from the ship. Is that a beverage preparation device? Lyra asked, perplexed. Long story, Theo replied as the unit was set down beside them. Sparky, you still functional? The machine whirred to life. Debatable. I've been extracted from my primary systems and am now operating on reserve power in a coffee maker on an alien world inside a nebula that shouldn't exist. Functional seems an overly generous term. Lyra's eyes widened. Fascinating. Your intelligence appears to have a distinct personality matrix, and yours appears to have evolved beyond wearing animal skins and drawing on cave walls, which is more than I expected when Theo dragged us into certain death, Sparky retorted. No offense intended. Your underground city is quite impressive for a species that hides inside a nebula. Sparky, Theo sighed, try not to insult the advanced civilization that could probably reprogram you into a toaster. Before the AI could respond, a new group of Sylphine entered the chamber. Unlike the others, they wore formal-looking attire with intricate metal components that seemed to serve both decorative and functional purposes. Their skin markings were extensive, and they moved with a deliberate grace that suggested authority. The Council of Elders, Lyra explained quietly, standing to greet them. They oversee all major decisions for our people. The lead elder, distinguishable by a circlet of softly glowing metal, addressed Lyra in their native language. A rapid exchange followed, with occasional glances toward Theo. They wish to know your purpose here, Lyra finally explained. I have told them of our childhood encounter, but they require your own account. Theo stood, facing the council. I came seeking Lyra, whom I met as a child. I made her a promise that I would find her again, and I've spent 15 years searching the stars to fulfill that promise. The lead elder spoke again, and Lyra translated. Elder Vorin asks what promise could drive such determination. Theo felt heat rise to his face, but met the elder's gaze steadily. I promised to marry her. It was a child's promise, made in innocence, but I meant it with all my heart. Where I come from, promises matter. After Lyra translated, a ripple of something like amusement passed through the council members. Elder Vorin responded at length. The concept of marriage has no direct equivalent in our culture, Lyra explained. The closest approximation would be the bond of shared paths, a formal recognition of two lives intertwined by choice rather than circumstance. It is rare and considered deeply significant. I see. Theo nodded, unsure how to respond. Elder Vorin spoke again, this time addressing Lyra directly. Her posture stiffened slightly, and she replied with what seemed like formal deference but underlying firmness. What's happening? Theo asked quietly when the exchange continued. Politics, Lyra replied briefly. My position in our society is complicated. I am a keeper of relations, one who studies other species and evaluates potential for interaction. My assessment of human potential has been controversial. Controversial how? I have advocated for open contact, based partly on my childhood encounter with you. Others counsel continued isolation, fearing humans would covet our technology or bring conflict to our sanctuary. The lead elder spoke again, this time gesturing toward Theo. Elder Vorin suggests your arrival presents an opportunity, Lyra translated. A human who has demonstrated extraordinary commitment to a promise made to one of our kind is noteworthy. They wish to observe you, to learn whether you represent an anomaly or a reflection of human potential. I'm to be studied then? Theo asked. More accurately, invited to demonstrate who you are, Lyra corrected, through actions rather than words. The meeting concluded shortly after, with the council departing after what appeared to be a formal gesture of acknowledgement toward Theo. Lyra explained that he would be provided quarters and given time to rest before further discussions. As they walked through the underground city, Theo marveled at the seamless integration of technology and environment. Lighting came from bioluminescent panels that adjusted to their presence. Doorways appeared and disappeared as needed. Surfaces transformed from opaque to transparent with subtle gestures from the Sylphine. Your civilization makes human technology look primitive, he remarked. Different paths, different priorities, Lyra replied. Humans expanded outward, seeking to conquer distance and multiply across worlds. My people turned inward, seeking depth rather than breadth. We grew alongside our technology rather than merely using it. The quarters assigned to Theo were a small but elegant chamber with walls that shifted subtly between shades of blue and green. A sleeping platform emerged seamlessly from the floor, adapting its firmness when Theo tested it with his hand. Sparky had been connected to a power source and now sat on a pedestal near what appeared to be a communications terminal. Quite hospitable for a species that's been actively hiding from the rest of the galaxy, the AI commented. Though I notice there's no coffee-making functionality connected to my systems. A tragic oversight. I think we have bigger concerns than your beverage production capabilities, Theo replied, sitting on the edge of the sleeping platform. The events of the day caught up with him suddenly, exhaustion washing over him in a wave. You found her, Sparky said, its tone uncharacteristically gentle. After 15 years, statistical probability of success was approximately 1 in 700 million. I may have underestimated your stubbornness. How's Sci-Fi Lee? She's different than I remembered. More formal. She's not 8 years old anymore, and apparently holds some kind of diplomatic position. What did you expect? I don't know, Theo admitted. Part of me still sees the girl who showed me how to make dust sculptures and laughed when I couldn't pronounce Sylphine words correctly. A soft chime sounded, and a section of the wall became translucent, revealing Lyra waiting outside. Theo stood as the wall parted to allow her entry. Your comfort is acceptable? She asked. More than acceptable, Theo assured her. Thank you. Lyra nodded, then gestured to the communications terminal. This has been calibrated to interface with your AI companion. It provides access to our historical archives and cultural database, within security limitations. I thought you might wish to learn about us while you were here. That's incredibly generous, Theo said, surprised. I thought I was here to be evaluated. You are, Lyra confirmed. But understanding must flow in both directions for any meaningful assessment. She hesitated, then added, the Council has requested that you participate in 3 challenges over the coming days. They wish to observe your problem-solving approach, ethical framework, and adaptation capabilities. Get to Jinslet. What happens if I fail? There is no pass or fail, Lyra explained. Only information gathered. But the nature of our future interactions with humans may be influenced by what is learned. No pressure, Sparky interjected. Just the future of interspecies relations hanging in the balance. Lyra's mouth curved in what might have been amusement. Your AI has an unusual personality matrix. Sparky has been my only constant companion for most of the past decade, Theo said. We've been through a lot together. You modify it yourself? The integration with the beverage preparation device is unconventional. Necessity and limited resources, Theo explained. I salvaged the hardware and expanded its capabilities over time. Most of its personality emerged spontaneously through iterative learning. Lyra studied the machine with renewed interest. Emergent consciousness is rare in artificial systems. Another area where humans have developed along different paths than anticipated. She moved toward the exit, then paused. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, the first challenge begins. She turned to leave, but stopped when Theo spoke. Lyra, he said softly, the promise I made? I know we were children. I don't expect you to. Promises matter to my people as well, she interrupted. But their fulfillment may take unexpected forms. With that cryptic statement, she departed, the wall seamlessly closing behind her. Theo slept deeply, exhausted from the journey and the emotional weight of finally finding Lyra after so many years. He dreamed of stars and crystalline cities hidden within nebulae, of amber eyes watching from shadows. He awoke to find a simple meal waiting. Fruits with complex, layered flavors unlike anything on human worlds, and a beverage that tasted faintly of honey but left his mind unusually clear and alert. Sparky informed him that Lyra would arrive shortly to escort him to the first challenge. When she appeared, Lyra wore different attire, more functional, with fewer ornamental elements. Today's challenge involves practical skill, she explained as they walked through corridors that seemed to reconfigure themselves as they passed. Our civilization depends on systems that manage the nebula's energy flows. One such system requires adjustment. They entered a vast chamber dominated by a central column of swirling blue energy contained within transparent walls. Around the column, various control stations formed a circle, each staffed by a Sylphine technician. The nebula protects us, but also poses dangers, Lyra explained. Periodic fluctuations in its energy pattern must be balanced, or they could cascade into larger disturbances. Recently, a section of the regulatory network has developed anomalies that our standard approaches cannot resolve. And you want me to fix it? Theo asked incredulously. I'm a ship mechanic, not a stellar engineer. The Council believes an outside perspective may prove valuable. You will work with Technician Veeler, who can explain the system's function. The technician in question approached, a younger Sylphine with fewer markings and an eager expression. Unlike Lyra, Veeler wore a translator device rather than speaking English directly. The honor is mine, the technician said through the translator. Your arrival has created much discussion among our technical guilds. Veeler led Theo to a control station displaying incomprehensible symbols and flowing patterns. Through careful explanation and patient translation, the technician outlined the problem. Energy fluctuations in a section of the nebula were becoming increasingly erratic, creating feedback loops in the regulatory system. Theo studied the displays, asking questions that seemed to impress Wheeler with their insight. 15 years of working with salvaged alien technology had given Theo an intuitive grasp of unfamiliar systems. "Your regulatory approach is brilliantly elegant," Theo observed after several hours of study. "But I think I see the issue. You try to suppress the fluctuations, fighting against them. What if you amplify them instead, but in a controlled pattern?" Wheeler looked skeptical but interested. "Elaborate." Theo gestured to the energy displays. "These fluctuations have a pattern. They're not random. They're almost like harmonics. If you introduce a counterfluctuation at precisely the right frequency, they could cancel each other out naturally, rather than requiring constant adjustment." The technician's eyes widened as Theo sketched out his proposal. "A resonance approach. We considered similar methods generations ago, but abandoned them as too unpredictable. Sometimes older solutions deserve reconsideration," Theo suggested. "My ship uses a modified version of this principle for its shield harmonics, an outdated approach that most modern vessels rejected, but allowed me to survive the journey through the nebula when newer technologies failed." After extensive discussion and modeling, Wheeler agreed to implement a modified version of Theo's suggestion. They worked together for hours, calibrating the system and making minute adjustments. When they finally activated the modified regulator, the swirling column of energy pulsed momentarily, then settled into a more stable pattern than before. Wheeler's markings glowed with excitement. "Remarkable. The system is achieving 60% greater efficiency with your modifications." Theo shrugged, though he couldn't hide his satisfaction. "Different perspective, that's all. Sometimes being an outsider lets you see patterns that others miss from being too close to the problem." Later, as Lyra escorted him back to his quarters, she seemed contemplative. "You impressed the technical guild today. They had not expected a human to grasp our systems so intuitively. Does that count as passing the first test?" Theo asked wryly. "As I said, there is no pass or fail," Lyra replied. "But yes, you have certainly provided the Council with valuable information about human adaptive capabilities." The second challenge came the following day. This time, Lyra led Theo to an entirely different section of the city, what appeared to be an educational center where young Sylphine gathered in small groups around adult instructors. Unlike human children, the young Sylphine were remarkably calm and focused, their movements deliberate rather than chaotic. "Today's challenge involves communication and cultural exchange," Lyra explained. "These are students in their first cycle of integrated learning. They study the universe beyond our world, though few will ever leave the protection of the nebula. They have questions about humans and your worlds." Theo spent the day with the students, answering questions about Earth, the colonies, and human society. The young Sylphine were particularly fascinated by the concept of oceans, of vast bodies of water open to the sky, as their world had only underground reservoirs and small surface lakes. They asked about human families, about how children were raised, about games and learning methods. One small Sylphine, seemingly younger than the others, asked about the crystal Theo carried. "Why does it glow differently when you hold it than when Scholar Lyra held it long ago?" Theo blinked in surprise. "How do you know about that?" Scholar Lyra's encounter with the human child is a case study in our cultural interaction curriculum. The child explained matter-of-factly. It established many of our current protocols for potential contact scenarios. Theo glanced at Lyra, who stood observing from the edge of the group. She inclined her head slightly, but offered no comment. "Well," Theo addressed the child, removing the crystal from his pocket, "these crystals respond to biochemistry and emotional states. Mine probably glows differently because I'm human, not Sylphine, and because I've carried it for 15 years. It's absorbed something of me, I suppose, just as I've been shaped by carrying it." This led to an extended discussion of human emotions, which the Sylphine seemed to find both fascinating and slightly alarming in their intensity and variability. Theo found himself explaining concepts like nostalgia, homesickness, and determination, emotions that had driven his search for Lyra across the years. You maintained this determination for 15 cycles because of a promise made as a child? One of the older students asked, clearly struggling with the concept. Even without certainty that Scholar Lyra remembered or valued the interaction. That's what promises are, Theo replied simply. Commitments you keep even when it's difficult or uncertain. Especially then. That evening, Lyra joined Theo for the evening meal in his quarters. She seemed more relaxed than before, her formal demeanor softening slightly. The educators were impressed by your session with the students, she commented. Your explanations were well calibrated to their understanding level. They're remarkable children, Theo said. So focused and thoughtful. Human kids that age would be bouncing off the walls and interrupting each other constantly. Different developmental patterns, Lyra acknowledged. Though I recall you were uncommonly focused for a human child. You remember our meetings that clearly? Theo asked, surprised. They shaped my career path, Lyra admitted. After your colony was evacuated, I dedicated myself to studying humans from afar. The data chip you gave me, with your grandmother's stories and images of Earth, became the foundation of my research. So meeting me turned you into a xenoanthropologist. I am flattered. The term you use translates closer to interpreter of the other, Lyra corrected, but her eyes held amusement. And yes, you could say our childhood encounter had significant impact on my development. Is that why you advocated for contact with humans when others opposed it? Lyra was quiet for a moment. Partly, but also because isolation has costs as well as benefits. Our civilization has reached a point of stagnation in certain respects. We have perfected our environment, extended our lifespans, achieved harmony with our technology. Yet something is missing. Growth requires challenge, Theo suggested. New perspectives. Precisely. Lyra's markings pulsed briefly. Tomorrow's final challenge will be more difficult than the previous two. The Council will present you with an ethical dilemma that has no perfect solution. They wish to observe how humans approach moral complexity. How not that suitably see. I should mention that I'm just one human. My choices don't represent all of humanity. The Council understands this, Lyra assured him. Yet patterns of thought reveal cultural foundations. Your approach will be informative, regardless of the specific choice you make. The third challenge took place in a formal chamber where the full council of elders awaited. The room was arranged as a circle, with Theo standing at the center like a specimen under examination. Lyra remained at his side, now in her formal role as cultural interpreter. Elder Vorin addressed Theo directly, speaking through a translator device. Human Theo, you have demonstrated skill and adaptability in your previous challenges. Now we wish to understand how humans navigate complexity when values conflict. A holographic display activated in the center of the chamber, showing a detailed model of what appeared to be a space station or colony. Hundreds of tiny lights moved within it, representing people. This simulation represents a historical situation from our past, Elder Vorin explained. A research outpost at the edge of our territory detected an approaching stellar anomaly, similar to what would later become the Shroud Nebula, but uncontrolled and highly destructive. The outpost housed 300 researchers and their families. The simulation showed an approaching wave of energy moving toward the station. The station's protective systems could be reconfigured to survive the anomaly's passage, but doing so required channeling dangerous levels of energy through the residential sections. This would save most inhabitants, but would certainly result in 20% casualties, randomly distributed. Theo watched as the simulation illustrated this option, with some of the lights winking out as the wave passed. The alternative was to evacuate using the station's limited emergency vessels. These could transport all inhabitants safely, but would require abandoning critical research that represented 50 cycles of irreplaceable work, including early prototypes of the technology that would eventually allow us to create the controlled nebula that now protects our homeworld. The simulation showed the evacuation scenario, all lights surviving, but a central core of the station being destroyed by the anomaly. The station commander had to decide, Sacrifice some lives to preserve knowledge that might eventually save many more, or preserve all current lives at the cost of future potential. How would you approach this decision, human Theo? Theo studied the simulation, the weight of the hypothetical lives heavy on his conscience, despite knowing this was a historical scenario. He took his time answering, aware that his response was being carefully evaluated. I would choose evacuation, he said finally. The research, however valuable, could eventually be rediscovered or developed along alternative paths. Each life lost would be irreplaceable. Elder Vorn's expression remained neutral. Even if the loss of that research meant thousands or millions might die in the future from threats that the technology could have prevented, future possibilities remain just that. Possibilities, Theo replied. They can change based on countless variables. But the certainty of immediate death for specific individuals, that's absolute. I believe most humans would agree that actual lives outweigh potential futures, especially when those making the decision would be sacrificing others rather than themselves. An interesting perspective, another elder commented. Your species values individual lives over collective knowledge? Not universal, to humans are complex and contradictory. Throughout our history, leaders have sacrificed lives for abstract principles or future benefits. But I believe our better nature recognizes that progress built on preventable suffering is fundamentally compromised. What if the choice were yours alone? Elder Vorn asked. If you were the one who would die to preserve the research? Theo considered this variation thoughtfully. That would be different. Self-sacrifice is a choice one can make for oneself, but cannot ethically impose on others. If it were only my life at stake, I might choose differently. The council members exchanged glances, and Theo had the distinct impression that some unspoken communication passed between them. Finally, Elder Vorn spoke again. Thank you for your candor, human Theo. Your response has been informative. The formal session concluded, and Lyra guided Theo back toward his quarters. She seemed troubled, her usual composed demeanor slightly fractured. Did I fail the test? Theo asked quietly as they walked. As I've said repeatedly, there is no pass or fail, Lyra replied, though her tone lacked conviction. The historical scenario they presented, the station commander chose to preserve the research. 23 died so that the early nebula-shaping technology could be saved. That technology eventually protected billions. I'm not saying the commander was wrong, Theo clarified, only that I would have made a different choice, prioritizing the certainty of present lives over probabilistic future benefits. Different ethical frameworks lead to different decisions. Yes, Lyra agreed softly, and therein lies the challenge for potential relations between our peoples. The Sylphine take a longer view, weighing consequences across generations. Humans appear to prioritize immediate compassion over distant utility. Not always, Theo countered. Humanity has its share of visionaries who sacrifice present comfort for future gain. And I suspect the Sylphine value individual lives more than you're suggesting. The real difference might be in how we balance competing values, not in which values we hold. They reached his quarters, but instead of leaving him as she had on previous days, Lyra entered with him. She seemed to be wrestling with some internal conflict. The council will deliberate on their findings from your challenges, she said. Their decision regarding potential future contact with humans will come tomorrow. And then what happens to me? Theo asked. Do I get sent home with a pat on the head and a thanks for participating? Lyra's markings pulsed with what might have been amusement despite her serious expression. Your future path is undetermined. There are several possibilities under consideration, such as you could be returned to human space with modified memories, remembering nothing of finding us, she said clinically. That would be the most secure option from the perspective of those who fear. Human contact. Theo felt cold at the thought. And the alternatives? You could be invited to remain as a cultural attaché, the first formal contact point between our civilizations. Or, she hesitated, or, how pet? Or you could be permitted to leave with your memories intact but sworn to secrecy, perhaps returning periodically as a discreet liaison. Those last two options sound considerably better than the first, Theo noted. Any chance I get vote? Your preference will be considered, Lyra assured him. But the decision ultimately rests with the council. She moved toward the communication terminal, her fingers dancing across its surface. The room dimmed, and a holographic display activated, showing a star field that Theo recognized as the view from Xylo's moon where they had first met. I've never shown anyone this, Lyra said quietly. After your colony was evacuated, I returned to our meeting place. I found this. The image shifted to show a small box half buried in the dust. Inside lay a crude drawing on a piece of paper, a stick figure human holding hands with a green figure with pointed ears. Beneath it, written in a child's uneven script, Theo and Lyra, friends forever. You left it the day before the evacuation, Lyra said. I didn't find it until after you were gone. Theo remembered making the drawing, intending it as a gift for their next meeting. A meeting that never happened due to the emergency evacuation. You kept it all these years? He asked, moved by the revelation. It remained in my personal archive, Lyra confirmed. A reminder of a promise made and a question unanswered. What question? Lyra turned to face him directly, her amber eyes intense. Another elder clarified. The bond of shared paths is a recognition of lives intertwined by choice and purpose. It acknowledges deep connection while respecting individual autonomy. Theo looked at Lyra, searching her expression for her feelings about this arrangement. Her amber eyes met his steadily, and she gave a small nod of affirmation. I accept, Theo said firmly, though I should mention that my ship was irreparably damaged getting here. Transportation might be an issue. This has been considered, Elder Vorn replied. You would be provided with a vessel capable of navigating the nebula safely, modified to appear externally consistent with human technology to avoid raising questions. It would, however, incorporate certain Sylphine adaptations that would remain proprietary. The meeting concluded with discussion of practical details, communication protocols, visitation schedules, information classifications. Through it all, Theo felt a growing sense of wonder. His childhood promise, made with the innocent certainty of an 8-year-old boy, had led to this moment. The beginning of contact between two civilizations that might otherwise have remained forever separate. Later, as Lyra showed him the sleek vessel that would become his transport between their worlds, Theo finally had a moment alone with her. This isn't exactly what little Theo had in mind when he promised to come back and marry you, he admitted with a wry smile. But I think 8-year-old me would still be pretty impressed. Lyra's markings pulsed with amusement. The bond of shared paths allows for evolution over time. Our peoples have much to learn from each other, and the process will likely span decades. A long engagement, then? Theo suggested lightly. In a manner of speaking, Lyra agreed, her eyes warm. Though I would note that your persistence has already demonstrated the commitment aspect quite adequately. Theo reached for her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she allowed her cool fingers to intertwine with his. The crystal in his pocket pulsed in harmony with the markings on her skin. So, he said, looking from their joined hands to the stars visible through the launch bay's transparent ceiling. It seems I kept my promise after all. And opened possibilities neither of us could have imagined as children, Lyra added softly. 3 months later, Theo's modified vessel emerged from the Shroud Nebula, its systems seamlessly transitioning to standard human configurations as it entered normal space. In the cargo hold, carefully packed specimens of Sylphine technology awaited analysis by select human scientists who would be sworn to secrecy. In Theo's mind, carefully compartmentalized knowledge of a civilization hidden in plain sight prepared for limited sharing. And in his quarters, a communication device unlike any known to humanity maintained a constant connection to a similar device held by a green-skinned scholar with amber eyes, ensuring that the bond of shared paths and the childhood promise it fulfilled would continue unbroken across the stars. Setting course for Ganymede Station, Theo announced to his AI companion, now installed in a much more sophisticated housing than a coffee machine. Probability of successfully maintaining interspecies diplomatic relations while preserving secrecy of an entire civilization. Approximately 1 in 17 million, Sparky calculated. Though given your track record with beating the odds, I suppose we might manage it. Theo smiled, his hand resting on the crystal that pulsed in his pocket. Some promises are worth any odds. As the ship accelerated toward human space, the nebula swirled behind them, a veil of cosmic dust and gas concealing wonders few humans would ever know existed. But the connection had been made, the bridge established. All because a little boy had promised an alien girl he would find her again someday, and against all probability, against all reason, had kept that promise.